Alexander, and welcome to Dish About the Dish, where the foods we eat tell the stories of our lives. Joining me today is my favorite cover model and yours, Wayne. So,
Uh,
hi. Good morning.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. This should be fun.
I know you're my first non-author interview.
Okay.
So this will be extra fun, but I don't want to just interview authors. I want to interview everybody because everybody has a story to share about
Yeah.
themselves and how food shapes the most memorable parts of themselves, whether they know it or not. So,
Yeah.
and you're such an interesting guy anyway. So please share with me, what is your most memorable meal?
So I thought a little bit about this for the past couple of days, and um, I've had a lot of meals in my life. I eat about every 3 hours, so I have a lot of meals in my life constantly. But one thing that really sticks out is the first time I had a hamburger so good that I decided that I would start rating other hamburgers for the rest of my life against that one hamburger.
Oh yeah, that's so tough though, because tough.
Yeah, well, I was on a road trip to go see a friend. She ended up going to the hospital, so I ended up not getting to see her. So I ended up in this little town of Duval up in Washington. And just middle of nowhere, but apparently there's some money there. And their little bar and grill I walked into was like one of the only places to eat in the whole town. I walked in and just it looked fantastic in there. So I'm like, okay, they'll have a good burger. I was starving at this point. And I had a burger that I'm like, well, this is it. This is 10 on my new 10 scale that I just came up with. So like I sat there for a while and just tried to figure out why was it so good. And I only had one beer. It wasn't because I was drunk. Um, and so I just kind of put it together in my head, like, okay, it had to have bacon and avocado. You have to have that to have a 10 burger, I think. But everybody else's 10 scale is subjective, right? But I think I remember that one the most because ever since then, every hamburger that I've ever had, like my wife and I will have full conversations about how did that rate on your 10 scale and why. Um, and then this burger that I had was before I ever even met my wife. And so I met her. I think we were dating. I don't think we were even engaged yet. And we were going up to Seattle. Might have been going to Bellevue, actually. Might have been the whole idea. And so I thought, well, we're going to go back to this place in Duval and we're going to try this and see if it's still that good. And it'd probably been 3 or 4 years, you know. I mean, it's a little pub in the middle of nowhere. I'm sure they've had other people come and go who make these burgers, and it still scored a 9.8, which is really, really good. Yeah. So now when people ask, you know, how was your food? My wife like gives me the stare down, like, don't answer honestly. They're not asking because they really care. They're not going to go tell the manager that you said the burger was a 8.2 and why, you know. They're just making sure that their tip is going to be okay. Just leave it alone, but I can't leave it alone. I have to give details, you know, like, well, you could have toasted the bun a little bit better, you know, like the order of the vegetables wasn't quite right, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, I get pretty detailed on it now, but I also give credit where it's due. I was in Idaho on my way to climb some mountains, and I had just quit a job right before I started at Intel, where I'm at now, hence the incredibly boring walls. And I had like a 9.9, something like that. It was wonderful. And it was a new restaurant. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that, hey, this is really legit. So I acted like I was like a hamburger journalist, basically. And I had this full conversation with the bartender who had given me my burger. And I said, and I want you to take this $10 bill and go in the back and give this to whoever made that burger. And when they did that, I just disappeared, just like off into the mist, just to make it more mysterious. They'd be like, "Who was that man who knew everything about hamburgers?" You know. So that's what I've become because of that.
Hamburger connoisseur. So is that restaurant, have you looked to see if they're still in business after this past year?
The one in Duval or the one in Idaho?
either of them.
Oh, well, I haven't checked on the one in Duval because I really don't make it up there that often anymore. So, the one in Idaho, I actually went back the very next year and it had completely changed.
Oh,
There was still a restaurant there, but it was different ownership, different name, and I had a hamburger and it was like a 5.
oh,
So,
see, that's a disappointing because I would like
yeah,
give them a shout out, try to help these businesses out in this time
right?
of strife, especially with restaurants. Although I've been ordering out way more
Yeah,
this week. This was a
yeah,
bad week. It's just delivery. Here we go. I'm helping the economy, is what I say. I'm helping the
exactly.
economy out.
Yep,
Now, you had
yep.
mentioned hiking, which I was going to ask you about because you're a very outdoorsy guy and you like camping. So, when you go camping, how do you prepare your meals for when you're out in the sticks with whatever you're carrying on your back? Which you carry more on your back than most people do when you go camping.
Well, I do sometimes, but the older I get and the more bills I pay off, the more money I spend to go as light as possible. One of the ways I stay light is I do use some dehydrated meals, but I only do that if I know I'm going to be really working really hard because those dehydrated meals are just loaded with tons of salt. They're loaded with carbs, which is good if you're really working your butt off. But if I'm just going out to hang out, I'm much more apt to cook something at home and then take it. Like I love to make a big thing of stew. I'm an elk hunter, so I have lots of elk in the freezer. So I'll cube that up, throw in some vegetables and stuff, and then I have better control over, what my macronutrients are. So I can add more potatoes or less potatoes depending on like if I'm going to go climb a mountain, lots of potatoes. If I'm going to sit around camp and drink whiskey all day with my wife, probably not so many potatoes needed, that sort of thing. My wife gets really bored of the same thing all the time, which I don't know why she's married to me. But so she needs variety. So I'll take a lot of the dehydrated meals for her. And she likes to do a lot of meal planning too. She takes lots of fruit. She'll try to make sandwiches beforehand, which I'm not into because then they just get soggy. Like you can't put jam on bread and then expect it to still be good 6 hours later, in my
Right.
opinion. Other than that, if I'm going, like let's say I'm gonna go climb a mountain, which I do all the time, you can't digest that much at one time, especially at higher elevation. And when you don't want to sit down for too long at one time. So I don't want to sit for more than 20 minutes. So I can't have this great big meal and I can't cook. So I do rely a lot on bars and goo packets and stuff like that. And it's not fun. None of those taste very good. But I'm more focused on just, how hard can I work going up this mountain and not have to digest this big chunk of food, so can't take the stew on a trip like that.
Yeah. So that's when you're eating for fuel and not for pleasure.
Right. Exactly.
Because you've done bodybuilding competitions and what before. So I'm sure your view of food is much different than somebody else's who's just eating because they're hungry. Is that become a challenge in your life? Is that has it been ever a struggle, or was it rather easy for you to make that switch between eating for fuel and then eating for your top 10 hamburger?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was fortunate that when I really got into bodybuilding and decided to make it a big part of my life, I was single. And so I didn't have to work with anybody else on what meals we were going to eat. I could just eat whatever the hell I wanted, So that's when I discovered that I could take a whole 4-pound bag of chicken breast, cook it all at the same time. And while that's cooking, pull out my rice cooker, get that going. And then, while the oven's already hot from the chicken, I could just do this great big, 3-pound bag of frozen broccoli and then just put that in 3 giant Tupperwares. Then I'm good for like 4 days. Right. And then like I said, my wife is the one who just can't eat the same thing all the time. That's not me. I can do that no problem. I can switch up the hot sauce and that changes things up, barbecue sauce one day and so I guess then when I met my wife, I was so sick of trying to impress people that there was no like, oh, look at how awesome I am. I cook these wonderful meals at home. I'm like, this is just what I eat. This is my 3 Tupperwares full of stuff last me 3 days, and that's it. And she started out fine with that. Like we didn't start with any sort of pretense that there wasn't something like that. And so she just kind of fell right in line with that. She cooks my chicken and rice for me all the time. I work 12-hour days, and so she will text me like, "Hey, are you out of chicken and rice?" Because it really doesn't take that long to cook, and so she knows that I'm happy that way. And then she likes to cook nice dinners, and so she gets her variety, and it works out really, really well. And she has been so supportive on the whole bodybuilding thing. It's been really amazing. Um, I think it's probably good to note that as a bodybuilder, getting close to a show or a photo shoot or something like that, dropping your carbs too low can make you into an absolute asshole to be around. And she had to go through that in the beginning, and that was terrible for both of us. And especially being newlyweds at that time, like we had plenty of other things to argue about. We didn't need to add that to the mix. But she stuck with me, and I think that she kind of helped me realize that I was being an ass when I was just really hungry and just needed to eat more. So that was pretty wonderful. She's been my biggest support through all of this stuff.
Well, that's excellent. Every bodybuilder that I know, every guy that watches their weight, it's chicken, rice, broccoli. Every Instagram feed I will see at least once a month, the chicken, rice, broccoli countertops. For people who are trying to be more healthy and meal planning, what else is there besides the chicken, rice, and broccoli?
Unfortunately, not a ton that's really convenient. I mean, there's a lot of other things you can eat. The reason that I stick to the chicken and rice and broccoli is the chicken, obviously, for protein, that's fairly lean. Also, because it's super easy to cook. I love to cook other stuff too, but it takes longer to cook my elk and my deer and fish and stuff like that. Thankfully, that's when my wife makes a nice dinner. She will make a ton of it because she knows that, well, I'm going to eat this for the next 3 days. So, so we have, we'll make 2 pounds of elk steaks or elk burger or something. So I've got lots left over. But I think fish is a great alternative to chicken. It's very similar with its protein. The fat in it is very healthy. So I think that's a great alternative. And then I eat rice because I digest it really well and it's easy to make in bulk. Again, convenience. But different people digest different carbs differently. So rice, I just digest it really well. I have a friend who was eating all rice because, like you, she sees all these pictures. Well, chicken and rice is just the thing to eat. And she just wasn't feeling very good on it. So I said, well, try potatoes and see if it's any better. It doesn't work for me that well because I just get really bloated and gassy, and that's no fun for anybody. And she switched from rice to potatoes and lost 10 pounds in about 3 days. And a lot of it was water weight because she was so bloated eating rice because her body didn't digest it well. And she's just been eating potatoes ever since. I couldn't live that way. I wish I could. I prefer potatoes over rice. I think most of us do. But it just worked out great for her. So find something that works for you. Like I digest pasta really well. That's one of my superpowers. So I could eat pasta every day and lose weight. Most people can't do that because wheat can be really hard to digest. But I think just finding the thing that works for you. And if all of that works for you, if all of that digests well, that's wonderful. You can go between pasta, and rice, and even throw in just bread as a carb because all of those 3 carb sources have fiber in them. So if you get the right rice, I did learn that the hard way. There's a lot of brown rice out there that's just white rice that's dyed. So if you're buying it hoping to get a little bit of fiber, you got to look at the back of the package and actually make sure that there's fiber in there. So thankfully, the stuff I get at Fred Meyer is actually brown rice, and there's like a couple grams of fiber.
Do you want to promote because I know you were doing like offerings of, wasn't a meal plan. Was it a meal plan?
Yeah, just meal plans. Yeah, I would take people's goals and then write plans for them. I didn't make any food or anything like that, but I write out plans for people. I could throw it out there. I don't have a lot of time for a lot of clients, but I could take a couple right now at the most, maybe 2 at the most. So www.enderfitness.com, and that's got all my meal plans on there, and it kind of gives a breakdown of how it works. And has links to all of my other social media too, if people want to follow me there.
Excellent. So somebody who's starting off trying to eat healthy, what is the number one thing besides, I'm going to preface this with, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. What would be the other important thing for people to remember when they're starting, especially because for me, I find the exercise part is actually pretty easy. It's just finding something you like and sticking with it, just get up and do it. But it's the food part that's the psychological part that is the most difficult, because I'm a stress eater. I found out.
Yeah.
That's what I do. And so when you're approaching food, what's the most important thing to remember, or the first step you should take in that journey?
What worked for me the most and what seems to connect with most people is thinking of your metabolism like a fire. Like say you just have a campfire, you wouldn't put a giant log on a medium-sized campfire because it's just going to go out. You also can't just put tiny little sticks all day because you're going to have to constantly put sticks on it all day long. So I tell people that eat roughly every 3 hours. And the goal is to eat enough to where you're not hungry anymore, but you will be hungry in about 2.5, maybe close to 3 hours. That can be really tough, especially for stress eating, which we all do. I do it too. It can be really tough, but one of the great things about eating every 3 hours is you can set your watch to it. It's a great starting point. And if you feel like stress eating, you're never that far away from the next meal. So if you can just hold out, like if you've eaten at 8 o'clock in the morning and work is getting really stressful at 10, just make it till 11, and have that meal planned out, have it ready to go in the fridge or whatever, but you just got to make it till 11, then you can eat again, then you're going to feel okay, right? And the great thing about that is it also doesn't come with the guilt of, like, I was stressed out, I ate a ton, now I feel bloated and too full and uncomfortable, but also guilty and terrible about myself because I just ate a ton of food, right? So I think planning out your meals, having it ready to go, and eating about every 3 hours, I think will help a lot. That helps your metabolism, that campfire burn nice and hot, keeps it going. Having a giant meal every once in a while is not a bad thing. I had a giant meal last night, celebrating some good times with some friends, and that was okay. One meal like that every few days is actually totally fine because your metabolism can handle that. Your campfire can handle one big log every once in a while. As long as around that you're still feeding it those small logs and keeping it burning really hot, So hopefully that helps a little bit.
I love the fact that you slipped in a camping analogy. That's great.
Right?
That was so awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your knowledge. This has been great, and it's been nice seeing you again. I want to say thank you again to Wayne for sharing with us all of his valuable information. And as you heard, he has a few client spots available. So if you're interested in his meal planning technique, check out the links down in the details below. And we thank you so much for sharing your time with us. If you had fun, give this video a like, maybe subscribe, because we'd like to have you join us again. And until next time, see y'all.